Okay, moving on to the last and final segment of today's show. There were a couple teams across college basketball, and most notably in the SEC, that I think did a really good job improving their chances at making the NCAA tournament this weekend. And there are a couple teams I wanted to talk about. Some teams that are on the right side of the bubble, some teams that are on the wrong side of the bubble, and there are going to be a lot of controversies when it comes to March, who deserves to be in, who doesn't. So I thought with the bracketology segment I'm going to be going out every Thursday on my Twitter, I thought this segment would be perfect for a conversation about each one of the following teams that I'm about to name. I wanted to talk a little bit about what each team did over the weekend in order to gain my attention from either a positive perspective or a negative perspective. So without further ado, once again, no music, I'm sorry, but let's get to it. The first team I wanted to talk about is from the SEC, and that is Eric Musselman and his Arkansas Razorbacks. And I think that right now, I am as comfortable as ever in saying that Arkansas is an NCAA tournament team. And I know Arkansas has been trending towards the NCAA tournament really all season long. However, at the same time, when you look at the Razorbacks, they had a pretty weak non-conference schedule, so they were going to have to do a lot of work in the SEC. Even when you look at their record and you saw, 10-0 in non-conference, but they've been quietly putting together some nice wins. They were able to go on the road to Missouri in Columbia and get the win on Saturday. On Tuesday night prior to that, they went into Lexington and beat Kentucky, and we've spoken plenty about Kentucky on this show. I totally understand that, but at the same time, being able to go on the road in conference play and get a big-time win like that is really impressive by Arkansas, and I'm more comfortable now than ever making them an NCAA tournament team. I know they're not technically on the bubble, but Arkansas is looking like they are in pretty good shape. The next team I wanted to talk about, let's stay in the SEC, and this is a team that isn't really on the tournament radar yet per se, but I'm telling you to keep an eye out on Kermit Davis and his Ole Miss Rebels, because the Rebels have very quietly, kind of similar to Arkansas, been playing some of the best basketball in the SEC. The other night against Tennessee, the Volunteers were really winning that game throughout, from start to finish, and I loved how Kermit Davis and his Ole Miss squad hung in there and were ready to go at all times. I love that they really didn't care what the score was of that Tennessee game. They knew, look, Tennessee, they were going to have trouble scoring the ball offensively, and we have to take advantage of that, and that is really exactly what Kermit Davis and the rest of his team did. They also picked up a big-time victory at South Carolina over the weekend. By big-time victory, I meant it was a statement win. I get it's not really going to do anything for their resume, but at the same time, that was really impressive. Nice job there, and Ole Miss is still going to have to do some work in order to get into the NCAA tournament, but one thing I noticed is that they always play hard, they always fight for their head coach Kermit Davis, and that is something that we can't say about every team and every coach in college basketball. So a really nice job by Ole Miss getting the job done this weekend. Let's go to the Big East, and I mentioned them briefly in the opening segment of this show, but I wanted to give a shout out to Dan Hurley and the UConn Huskies. And we know that Dan Hurley, since he's gotten to Storrs, he has that reputation of just being this guy that goes absolutely berserk on every referee that he ever sees, and he's a funny guy. But sometimes I think we forget, he's a really good basketball coach. The work that Coach Hurley was able to do at Rhode Island was super impressive, and he was absolutely deserving of getting a job like this one at UConn. And not everything has gone right for the Huskies so far this season with the injuries and the COVID and everything, but maybe that win could give them some momentum going forward. And prior to this game against Xavier, I had UConn right on the bubble. I had them, I believe, in the last four byes, I should say, had them right around that 11 line, and that win against Xavier is only going to improve their odds. UConn, from a resume perspective, they're not great. They have a couple okay, nice wins, a road win at Marquette, who isn't playing good basketball. That win hasn't necessarily aged that well. They also had a couple tough losses to Creighton, but going on the road to Xavier and getting a victory along with the USC victory as well, by the way, that win is looking better and better and better for UConn as time goes on. And I'll give the Huskies credit. They looked pretty good in their win against Xavier. Going on the road against a Big East Conference opponent is obviously never easy to do that. So shout out to the UConn Huskies. And the other team I wanted to talk a little bit about briefly, how about the Drake Bulldogs? And Drake was another team that we got to see up close and personal in a big time spot this weekend. They actually did battle with the University of Loyola Chicago, what the Missouri Valley has been doing in a very similar way to some of the other teams in the mid-major realms. They've been doing these series, so back-to-back in the same place to reduce travel. And one thing I will say was that I was really impressed with how Drake hung with Loyola the whole way in the second game. The game changed on a Roman Penn steal, turned into a 3, and if you haven't seen Roman Penn play, that is one of the more fun players to watch in all of college basketball. But we all know it. When you play in a league like the Missouri Valley and you want to make it without being a absolute, without any doubt, you're going to have to do whatever you can during non-conference, probably not lose that many games, and then during conference play there's so much pressure, it's so hard, and it's obviously going to be very interesting to see what exactly each conference does when it comes to the conference tournament this season and the selection of how each conference picks their bid. They could either play out a tournament like we normally do each and every year, or if conferences really want to reduce travel, and for example, a conference like the WCC, if I know technically BYU has a chance to win in St. Mary's and all that, but when you have one dominant team in a league like that, the main purpose of the conference tournament is to crown the champion and the best team in the conference. I don't necessarily know if it's going to be worth it for some of these teams to travel all the way to their conference tournament site. That's going to be a decision to keep an eye out on. That is going to be a decision where every conference is really going to have to make differently depending on their situation, and that's going to be one to monitor for sure. But nice job by Drake after losing a tough first game to Loyola Chicago. It wasn't really competitive. They were able to come back and get a big win, which could have saved their NCAA tournament lives. Really nice job by Drake. The next team I wanted to get into, let's kind of stay within this mid-major realm, and that is the VCU Rams. And I have been very impressed with Mike Rhodes and the work that he has done with this VCU squad in the Atlantic 10. You have to watch this kid, Boons Highlands, play. He is phenomenal. He's electric. He's acrobatic. I'm a big fan of his game. And one thing about the A10 is that before the season started, right, there were a lot of people like myself that were telling you guys, wow, okay, this could be one of the better years for the Atlantic 10 in a while because of the fact that it's got some depth now. St. Louis, they return basically everyone. They're looking pretty good. You got Richmond, they're returning everyone. They're looking pretty good. You got St. Bonaventure, they're playing well. You got Dayton, you got VCU. A lot of people, including myself, had that same mentality for the Atlantic 10 going into the season, and in terms of the depth and stuff, it's gotten a little worse than expected because the depth of that league has been proven to be so good that teams like VCU and St. Bonaventure and other teams at the top of that league, Davidson, like they're all just beating each other up. And Rhode Island is another one, Dayton, and there isn't really that best team in the league yet. It could be St. Louis, it could be VCU, it could be St. Bonaventure, but I was impressed with the way the Rams played against the Bonnies on Friday night, really dominated that game from start to finish. Really nice job by Mike Rhodes, Boons Highlands, and company. So keep an eye out on VCU and the Atlantic 10. I think right now, if you were to ask me, Zach, who is the best team in the Atlantic 10, they would be my pick. The next team I wanted to talk about, let's stay in that mid-major realm, and that next team I wanted to speak about with you guys is Craig Smith and his Utah State Aggies. And the thing about the Aggies was, it was only 2 years ago that these guys made the NCAA tournament. They won the Mountain West out of legit nowhere. They beat that loaded Nevada Eric Musselman Martin's team. And when you look at Utah State, it's crazy because a large majority of that team's core is basically back. When you look at Kada, you look at Justin Bean, Brock Miller, guys like that. They've had these group of players playing together for a while now. Plus, you throw in the addition of Alfonso Anderson and everything he's been able to do for the program. I like this kid, Raleigh Wolster. He's a nice little guard for Utah State. I think Craig Smith has this program in a really good spot right now. And let's keep in mind two things. One, last year, Utah State really didn't play that good of basketball at all throughout the season and got hot in the Mountain West tournament and ended up winning it. Unfortunately, they never got a chance, obviously, to play for their tournament lives. But Utah State was not the best regular season team last year and really came on around this time. You also look at the fact that the Aggies in the early portion of the non-conference slate, they were not good. I remember watching them play against South Dakota State, I believe it was, early on in November, and they didn't only lose, they got ran out of the gym. It wasn't even close. So when you look at Utah State, they're getting better as the season goes on. That is always something you want to see from an NCAA tournament team. I think they are a real coin flip in terms of their odds right now. And then the final team, let's go to the Big East. Seton Hall. Now, Seton Hall had a nice win over Marquette. Obviously, a win over Marquette these days isn't necessarily doing anything for your resume, but Seton Hall is an interesting team because they have taken a bunch of tough losses. And by tough losses, I mean, losses, but games that you're not going to penalize them for losing. Like losing on the road to Louisville. Like that's a game you expect Seton Hall to lose. Losing to Villanova and to Creighton. Like, okay, those aren't awful losses. I just think Seton Hall needs that one big-time quality win to push them over the top. I love Mamu. I love Jared Rhoden. They're starting to get a little healthier with Bryce Aiken back in the mix. And I trust Kevin Willard. He's been able to get Seton Hall back to the NCAA tournament each of the last couple of years. So I trust what he's doing there. That is my bubble report for today. Those are the 8 teams that stood out to me in terms of teams that really established themselves this weekend and put themselves in a position to monitor going forward.